The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the PASS Women in Technology virtual group. We exist to help women in the database platform community help each other grow our careers, be supportive, and one of the ways we do that is by providing a place that women can present, be that a women in technology type topic or a technical topic. And actually, that's what most of ours are. So we really encourage women to become speakers, to become writers. It really helps your career take off. You can find all of our videos out on our YouTube channel. You can just search for, go out to YouTube and just search for PassWit, if that's easier. Our homepage is wit.pass.org. And be sure to join our virtual chapter. That way you'll get our monthly newsletter and you'll find out about all of the things that we're doing, plus lots of things about other chapters when women are presenting for them, and also at SQL Saturdays. You can also follow us on Twitter as well. If you haven't registered for Pass Summit yet and you need a discount code, please use this code to get $150 off. Today's session is a special session sponsored by Redgate. Both Redgate and SentryOne support our chapter. We're really proud to have two wonderful sponsors. By having these sponsors, we can have the virtual group program that takes care of the expenses for these programs. But it also allows us to give away a gift card during each session. So I'll be awarding a $100 gift card. If you're the lucky winner, I'll contact you via email from the Pass WIT email box. I'm going to double check to make sure that I am recording. Here we are. Okay. There's quite a few SQL Saturdays coming up with women speaking at them, and I'm just really proud of this. That just a few years ago there were not many women speaking at SQL Saturdays, and today there are so many. It's just really wonderful to see. We've got Paris. Actually, that was last weekend. Paris and Los Angeles were last weekend. We have one coming up in Brazil. I'm not going to try to pronounce the name of that city. Iowa City, Chattanooga, Cork, I believe that's in Ireland, Pensacola, and that's just this month. We keep track of all the SQL Saturdays that are out there. Be sure to take a look at our Women in Technology page to see those. So we have a volunteer that kind of goes out and gathers that information up for us. So it's pretty much a month or so out at any given time. We also like to promote any of the women speakers, especially ours. We've got July 9th, we have Jess Pomfret speaking on configuring SQL Server with PowerShell. So that sounds like a really great topic, especially if you have to install a lot of SQL servers. This could really save you some time. Another one that is ours is September 18th, SQL Graph Revealed by Mala Hedovan. Sorry, Mala, if I mispronounced your last name there. But otherwise, there's quite a few in several other of the groups, the cloud group especially, DBA fundamentals. And obviously, women are speaking at even more things. We'll get the PASS speakers up pretty soon. As more of them are announced, we'll take care of that. And there's lots of other events that women are speaking at. We just highlight the ones that are kind of closest to us. So today's session is from Redgate Software. What is database DevOps and why should DBAs care? And I will actually be presenting that. I'm Kathy Kellenberger and I am a Redgate employee and also co-leader of the Women in Tech virtual group. So that's why I'm kind of doing both things here today. And database DevOps is something that a lot of folks in the database platform community haven't really thought about until maybe the last couple of years. It's something that's been evolving and really happening a lot on the dev side and operations other than database. So that's really a problem. So today I'll talk about why that's a problem and what are some of the things we can do about that. All right, so I'm going to switch over to another slide deck. And first of all, just a little bit about me. I am the editor of Simple Talk at Redgate, co-leader of this virtual group, and I'm very proud to be an instructor at Launch Code, which is a nonprofit that helps people get careers in technology. It provides free training. Okay, so if you have questions, be sure to go ahead and put them in the question box as we go along, and I'll try to answer them every once in a while. I've got a an item saying, Chattanooga is misspelled, so we'll take care of that after the session. Sorry about that. So let me go ahead and get started. First, I want to tell you a little bit about Redgate. I am probably most proud of the fact that Redgate owns both SQL Server Central and SimpleTalk. And I remember back when I was first a database administrator, way back like 17 years ago, I was out getting information from SQL Server Central every single day. And eventually, I started getting more information from SimpleTalk when it became available. It's not quite as around quite as long as SQL Server Central, but eventually I became an author there. And I'm just really proud to be the editor of SimpleTalk. So I think Redgate does a great job in helping the community, sponsoring user groups, sponsoring the virtual groups, SQL Server Saturdays, really involved in the community quite a bit. Redgate's 19 years old, and we have customers around the world, one-person shops all the way to large, Fortune 100 enterprises. And we also practice DevOps. Last year we had over 1,000 product releases. That number grows every single year, and it shows that we are practicing what we preach when it comes to DevOps. So what in the world is DevOps? What I want you to do is take a look at these three choices and see if you can come up with the right definition. Don't worry, this is the only question for you in this session, but just see if you can read through those and figure it out. I'll give you a minute or so to think about it. Okay, hopefully you've had a chance to read through those and you have an idea of which one it is. And the answer is the first one, the union of people, process, and products to enable continuous delivery of value to our end users. And that definition is from a gentleman who works at Microsoft, Donovan Brown. He is the principal DevOps manager there. So he is in the forefront of DevOps, very highly knowledgeable, and really kind of setting the stage for what the rest of us do. The second definition, an approach that aims at building, testing, and releasing software quickly and frequently, is actually agile, the agile method. Now, these two definitions are not mutually exclusive. A lot of folks start with agile and kind of roll that up into DevOps. And the third one, a framework for managing work in teams of 3 to 9 members, which breaks work into time-boxed sprints that are commonly 2 weeks long, is called Scrum. And that's a methodology that's used a lot in Agile. So none of these are mutually exclusive. they kind of roll up. The two bottom ones kind of roll up into DevOps. However, one of the differences in DevOps, you will typically have releases much more frequently than every 2 weeks, sometimes daily or even multiple times per day. So as I said, this is the definition that we're going to go with. There's other definitions out there, but they pretty much are similar. It really is a culture shift. It's standardizing processes. And really the way to do that is by having good tooling. And that's one of the ways that Redgate can help you. So what are the goals of DevOps? Delivering value quickly to the customer. If I am a developer at an organization, I'm not building software to make myself happy. Hopefully I am happy, but I'm not doing that for myself or for my team or for my department. It's for the customer. And if you cannot deliver value quickly, the customer can go somewhere else. That's why it's very, very important to get those new features and fixes out very quickly. And the overall goal is to add to success of the business. If the business is not making money, guess what? You are not going to have a job. A business that is not successful, does not make money, is not going to be around forever. It's going to end up failing. The way we accomplish this is, first of all, by removing technical silos. So what this means is that in a lot of companies, you have the DBAs, okay? You have developers, you have other operations teams, and a lot of times they don't talk to each other, and they don't really know what's going on the other teams. Sometimes this is called throwing things over the wall. The developers come up with changes to software, they get that done, they test it themselves, and then they throw it over to operations and expect operations, to get that rolled out. And there's often not a lot of communication between the two. So that's one of the first things, is removing those barriers. Often you'll see cross-platform teams. What this means is not only will we improve the communication between these teams, but we will also sometimes embed, for example, embed a database administrator over into the development team for a while. Things like that. Or just have a team that has, members of each area. The other problem is that a lot of companies think of IT as a cost center instead of thinking of it as how it brings value to the company. Every company is now a software company, whether they're selling widgets or whether they're a software as a service. And the only way that they can make this happen is by understanding the value and being able to invest in IT. You have to have the right tools, and one of the great things about tooling is that there's more and more out there. Redgate has quite a few products that help with the database side of things, especially. There are other competitors out there. No matter what you choose, just make sure you have some tooling. Some companies decide to build tooling inside. To me, that seems like a bad idea, because that takes away from what you're really supposed to be doing if you're spending all your time on developing the tools. But it does happen. Automation. Having as much automated as possible. So one of the things I think is kind of ironic about this is that with DevOps, we can have better communication with the other teams, but also automation and where there's good testing and everything is set up to flow well, cuts down on the need for a lot of communication. I've seen that in my own job. I'm not doing programming. I'm editor of Simple Talk, but I've bought a couple of tools to help me in that job where previously I have a lady that helps with getting the articles out, the newsletter out. It was for every article, it was 4 or 5 emails before an article was published. And now typically, because of the way that we use these tools, uh, there's only communication when something is out of the ordinary. It's just really amazing and so much more efficient. Another thing about DevOps, the way to accomplish it is measuring the right things. I know in my own career, I've worked in places where they've measured just something to measure. Okay. Uh, how many tickets can be closed in a short time? Well, how do we know that the customer's problem was solved and they just didn't close the ticket? So just being careful about measuring the right things. Some of the things that are measured in DevOps are things like lead time between request and something's rolled out, the number of releases, the rate of releases, the number of rollbacks, things like that are really important. The bottom line is that DevOps takes a broad cultural change, and there's 2 ways that can happen. You might have a team or some folks working on a project, and they decide to go ahead and implement DevOps processes or practices for that project, and just to see how it goes. And maybe other teams, other managers will start to see the success and start building from that. And that's really a bottom-up approach. It can happen the other way too. It can start at the top where a vice president or a C-level executive says, this is what we're doing. Of course, the teams are going to feel some resistance, but what are they going to do? They're going to have to follow it. So those are the 2 ways that it can happen. But in general, it really is a big change for a lot of companies. There are a lot of misconceptions out there, and I got these misconceptions from a book. I guess it'll show up at the end. So one of the misconceptions is that DevOps only involves devs and system administrators. It actually involves the entire company, every department, marketing, finance, HR, really everything. So you may be wondering why. I've adopted some DevOps practices in my own job, and I work as an editor. Marketing, they can help the IS side or IT side understand just what the customers really need, that type of thing. So it really involves the entire company. It can improve the efficiency of the entire company. Some places think that DevOps is just one special team that you hire that implements DevOps at an organization. It really isn't. It really involves everybody. Whoops. Some folks think that DevOps is a specific job title. Obviously, if you have experience in DevOps, that is a good thing. That may help you get a job or get a better job. But it's not a job title in itself. Some places may be pursuing people in that direction, but really that's really a misconception. DevOps means doing all the work with half the people. Guess what? Obviously you're going to become more efficient, but if you go in with this idea, guess what? People are going to leave. They are not going to be happy. There are other jobs out there. There is one right way to do DevOps. I talked about how agile methods kind of lead to DevOps. But that's not really the way it has to be. There isn't one way. It can be many different ways to get to that DevOps methodology. And it's really more, really not even a methodology, it's more of a culture. DevOps is a fad, something that's going to go away. Really, if you think about software, it's still, software engineering is still in its infancy. We've had a big evolution. We've gone from, waterfall to agile, now to DevOps. And it's really an evolution to get this right. I often say I'm glad that bridges aren't built the way we build software, or we'd all be in the river right now. So I feel like there's no real standard as far as education for developers and IT people. There are certifications, there's real life experience, but I feel like DevOps is a way that we can come up with standards, we can come up with ways to make sure that we are building software in a mature way. So I don't think it's going away. It might evolve to even something higher than DevOps, but it's really not a fad. The last one is one that I came up with. DevOps get the SA password. I'm sorry, developers get the SA password. Developers are going to be pushing some buttons that will move the database changes along, but they are not getting the SA password. There's still a need for database administrators, and developers will, this is not what it means. Developers are not now going to be in charge of the SQL Server. Guess what? They have a lot of work on their own to do. They have a lot to keep up with, and completely understanding how SQL Server works, the best way to do things in a database, is still our job. I want to recommend a book called The Phoenix Project, and I have read this a couple of times. I read it back when it first came out, and I really didn't quite understand the whole point of the book. This book is about a fictitious company that has a really fantastic manufacturing component. They have stores, they sell to stores, and they've been working on this project called the Phoenix Project. It's supposed to provide, I think, like a web interface for customers to order things. And this project has just been a disaster from day one. But then the management says we're going to roll it out whether it's ready or not. That's kind of scary, but I bet a few of you have heard something like that before. So this book talks about how they start in IT with these siloed departments, no trust between them, and have to figure out how to eventually roll out these improvements for their customers. So it's really a whole journey from really a disaster, firefighting, all the way to a very efficient DevOps culture. So it's a pretty fun read since it is a novel. It's not your typical technical book. When I first read it, I really the lesson I got out of it was don't be a bottleneck. There's one employee, and for some reason I'm thinking the name is Brett, who knows everything about the system, and he just gets pulled from project to fire to disaster constantly all day long. And he never has time to document anything he knows. And so I just felt like that was a good lesson. Make sure that I always document and teach other people the things that I know. So that was kind of the lesson I got from it back when it first came out. More recently, I read it again, and I understood a lot more about what companies have to go through to actually get to that DevOps culture in their company and how to implement it. So I really recommend it for those of you who haven't seen it before. Probably a lot of you have read it. There's also some surveys out. Dora has a State of DevOps report every year. I believe 2018 was the first time that it mentioned databases in the, it's basically a survey. But I found some things in the 2016 report that I really liked. And you can go search for this and download it for free. I have at the very end, I have a link to it as well. But what they found was high performing, meaning very mature, very efficient IT organizations have 200 times more frequent deployments than other organizations. That's a lot. We're talking multiple deployments per day. 24 times faster recovery from failure. So here's the failure is what we're all afraid of, that we're going to have to roll something back. They have 3 times less failures. So not only can they recover faster, they have less failures, and they have, oh wow, 2,555 times shorter lead time. So that means whenever a new feature is requested, they are able to implement it that much faster than anyone else. So if you think about it, a lot of times, especially the older waterfall, you might do a release once or twice a year. With Agile and Scrum, you might do an every 2-week release. We're talking about large amounts of changes all at once. No wonder you might have a bigger chance of failure. But with DevOps, you are releasing tiny changes using feature flags to turn things on and off, testing with smaller beta test groups. So you're able to get changes out a lot more quickly and a lot, what's the word I'm trying to say, successfully or with less risk. Redgate also has a survey that we send out every year, State of Database DevOps, where we kind of concentrate on DevOps. And I found some interesting things from the 2019 report. Again, you can go out and download these for free and take a look. And I encourage you to participate when we do this again. We'll probably, not sure what the dates are. It seems like last year it was around the November, December timeframe. So I encourage you to participate. What we found is that 85% of the companies are already using DevOps or plan to adopt DevOps in the next 2 years. So that's almost everybody. The problem is 66% of the people we talked to said that the database was not part of the automated build and deploy process. So you know what that means? Database changes are now a bottleneck that slows down DevOps at these companies, because you can't roll out a new feature if there are database changes and the database hasn't been updated. You know, for example, new tables or new columns or whatever it might be. So this is really a problem. And one of the things that they see as a drawback is that increased risk of failed deployments and downtime. So DBAs are a little worried when you say, hey, we're going to roll out these changes. So there is a big risk, and DBAs are aware of that, and it's frightening. We don't want these changes coming out because we know we're going to have to review all of them, especially if it's a large batch of changes. How in the world do we even read through all of that? So 61% of customers that we surveyed, or didn't even have to be customers, just companies, say that if they included the database in DevOps, it would have a positive impact on regulatory and compliance requirements. So it's not just even make the changes making their way to production. It's also providing automated ways that developers can get copies of production with sanitized data to do their development. And a lot of places, it's such a onerous task to get those new copies of production out to developers. They only do it on an infrequent basis, maybe once a month or a couple times a year. And that really makes a difference. Some places, let's see, I think that might be there we go. Some companies give a copy of production, 65%. They don't even change anything. 36%, and these are 36% do say that the data is masked. So if we kind of combined those two, about half the data is masked and half are not of that 65%. These are not going to add up to 100. They could answer multiple things. So it's not easy. It's going to take effort. It's going to take culture changes. And here's one of the problems. DBAs are typically judged and get bonuses and raises based on how stable the systems is, based on SLAs, 99.999, however many nines uptime they can get. Obviously, they're going to resist changes. Developers, however, are judged by release frequency. They don't care about the stability. If they're judged by how much they can get out, they're going to try to push out changes and new features as fast as possible. Guess what? You're never going to be able to implement DevOps with these two forces against themselves. We really need to measure everybody by the same thing. Everyone needs to be measured by how we can provide value to customers and keep things stable. So everybody, the developers need to be concerned about stability. The DBAs need to be concerned about releases too. So everybody really needs to have common goals. You may be wondering just what the DBA's role is in DevOps. As I mentioned, developers have enough to keep track of with changes to their languages, new things coming out. A week doesn't go by that you don't hear something new out on Azure or AWS. Things are changing so closely. It's really up to us to be the database specialist. We can help with things like query tuning. We can help build the pipeline that moves things along. We can be that final check in important systems or important tables to make sure that changes don't end up in production that could break things. We can also make sure that developers get copies on a frequent basis of sanitized data. So there really is quite a bit for the DBA to do, even in a DevOps culture. So the idea is that things are automated as much as possible. And for example, before production, there could be a build server where everything is tested to make sure that that final script doesn't break. There might be certain manual spots along the way, but there is quite a bit for DBAs to do, so don't worry about that. And I think it really will make the DBA's life better because they are then helping bring value to the company, helping the bottom line of the company. You don't have to be that scary DBA like my coworker Grant Fritchie. He got that reputation of being kind of scary in his early DBA roles. We don't want that. We want good communication. We want everything to run smoothly, and we all care about the company, and that's the most important thing. So here's some things that you might want to think about taking a look at if you are a database administrator and your company is just now kind of getting their feet wet with DevOps. You need to take a look at source control. Redgate has a product called SQL Source Control. There's others out there. No matter what, it's really important. So I've seen, I'm going to call it old-fashioned stored procedure source control, where I have a stored procedure, and every time I make a change, I just comment out the line until finally I have this stored procedure that has more commented out code than code that runs. That's one that's one old-fashioned type of DBA source control. I've seen it many places. Another thing is you might say, well, I can always get that copy of that stored procedure from an old backup. Okay, so over time that's not really realistic, and you've got to spend time tracking down that file if it still exists and restore. It's crazy. So you really need to think about having source control on your objects. The other thing too is don't just run something in production without having it go through source control, because if you do, we're going to get discrepancies in. So theoretically, we've got development databases, test databases, QA databases, build databases before we get to production. And if we're running things right in production to make tweaks or whatever that don't go through the pipeline, well, then guess what? All of these other databases are now out of sync with production. So if we try to push a change out, it might look like it'll be fine all the way through the pipeline, but then it won't be at production. So be really careful about that. Learning Git and GitHub are really important. As a longtime DBA, I don't feel comfortable yet. I'm still learning it. I was playing with it yesterday and this morning, and developers just take right to it. But I think DBAs are just going to need a little time, but it is a really important tool. Luckily, some tools will sit on top of it. For example, it used to be called Team Foundation Systems. Now I believe it's called Azure DevOps. Will sit on top of that, so you don't have to do as much of the command line. But speaking of command line things, PowerShell is really important. If you are not using PowerShell now, be sure to go out and get it and do a search for DBA tools. It's an open source project that has a lot of really great commands for DBAs. SQL Server runs on Linux now. Still in shock on that one, even after 2 years. You may be in a situation where you will be supporting SQL Server on Linux, so be sure to take a look at how to take care of that. We've got a series going right now on Simple Talk about that. I had learned Bash and Corn Shell back in the day, forgot all of that, so I'm learning it all again. Containers, really, really important. You're going to see a lot of sessions at Past Summit and SQL Saturdays about Docker, and it's just a really cool thing. And I really believe that in a few years, we will not have so many VMs all over the place. We'll be running SQL Server in Docker all over. I think now it's more of a test development type environment for SQL, but I think in the future it'll be all over the place. Data masking. So this is important for sanitizing data before it goes to developers. And of course, try to keep up with Azure. I'm trying to keep up with it. I know how hard it is, but find a few areas that really interest you and keep up. I'm really interested in machine learning, so I try to join webinars and read blog posts about every time there's something new in Azure machine learning. So I'm going to go ahead and show you a demo demonstrating some of the Redgate software on my, and hopefully you can all still see everything. I don't see anybody coming up saying anything in the chat or questions. So I have a database that I just have one. It's kind of a view of the people, kind of like a view. I used a view to generate this of the people in AdventureWorks. And I'm just going to keep that, pretend like that's my production copy. And I've made a regular copy. And I think that's it. Okay, so I'm going to just show you our data masking tool, which is part of SQL Provision. So SQL Provision has two components, a data masking tool and a cloning tool. And this SQL Provision can be used to provide copies of sanitized data to all your developers. So each developer can get a copy of production, even if it's in the terabyte size range, because these clones only take up just a small amount, 45 megs to get started. Now, as they make changes, that will grow, but they are pointing to an image that you could create, and you can mask that image. So I'm going to go ahead and just show you first the masking tool. So I already have a masking set up that will substitute the names. So I'll just show you that very quickly. Let's bring that over. Everything pops up in the wrong screen. So what we do is, it's really a great thing. We have data sets that we can use to apply to a column. So we could have different languages, male or female, whatever we want to do. So we aren't just scrambling the names. However, you could do that. We're using data sets. We provide quite a few data sets, and you can come up with your own as well. So I've got the first name, middle name, last name already done. But what I might want to do is create something that masks the email address based on the name. So I might want to have ken.sanchez@whateverbusiness.com. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cheat for a minute here. I have the formula I need already created. So I'm just going to copy that. And I am going to click New Rule. And you can see there are, quite a few. I don't know if there's a couple dozen, but there's quite a few different types of rules. And we can help you do things. Anything that's too complicated for these rules, we can help you figure it out. I'm going to do a new rule, internal sync. And I'm going to bring that over. This database only has this one table in it, so that's easy enough to suggest. And I'm going to replace the formula here with the first name plus last name plus plus this parameter plus .com. So I'm going to look for something that just has some words. Here we go. Dictionary words. Okay. And create the rule. And I would not like to create another one. The other thing I need to make sure of is that the substitution of the names is done before the email address. So I'm going to grab this and drop it on the substitution rule, and hopefully you noticed that that indented. So that way the substitution rule will run first. Otherwise, this is multi-threaded. It will run multi-threads for efficiency. And actually, I should go ahead and pop that one in too. Okay. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is just go ahead and run this masking set. It's going to run against my copy. And it shouldn't take too long. And it's really important that you don't run, when you're developing this, that you don't run against production, run against a copy. You will not be happy if your production data is changed. Okay, so I'm going to just close that. and just say yes. And working on it. Okay, well that's working. I'm just going to come back over here and run the query again. And you can see that it came up with names. Any place that the middle name was null, it skipped, and it used that formula to come up with fake email addresses. It's really important that you don't give your developers real email addresses, because if they're working on a function that sends out email addresses, they could accidentally send to customers. So think about that. All right, so that worked. So the next thing I'm going to show you is the clone interface. It's a web page, and there's a dashboard. Chances are you're going to be scripting everything to make it part of your pipeline, but I'll show you how it works just through the GUI. So I'm going to create an image. I can use a backup, or I could use connect directly to SQL Server. I'm going to just use SQL Server since that's what I practiced earlier, and connect to Dev and find my database. Oh, let's see, let's connect to production, not Dev. And I'm going to choose my masking test. And then I'm going to drop that masking set, which was in the middle of saving. Let's go to that one. Yes, and close that up. And then I'm going to go over and drag that in. And I could have other scripts if I would like. I'll click continue. Typically, you're going to use a UNC path because you want this available on the network for the developers, and in settings you can control who can do what. So there's definitely security based on groups. And I say, yeah, I do know what I'm doing here. So now I can review everything, and we'll just make that masking test 1 and create the image. Creating the image is where your effort is going to be. This is going to be similar to taking a backup. The image will sit, it will have all the data in it, all the mask data in it if you choose to do that. And the developers can either create a clone on their workstation, or you can create multiple clones on a development server. The beauty is once you have your image, and you can schedule this creation like every week or whatever, then your developers can just create their clones, and it just takes a few seconds to create a clone. The other nice thing is it doesn't take much room. So let's say you had a terabyte database, the image is going to take about a terabyte, but all of the clones will just be a few megabytes. And if they want to throw it away and recreate a new one, no problem. It can do that very quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and create a clone, and I'm going to choose the masking test, and I can make some modifications if I would like. Maybe that's adding users or removing users, something like that. I'm going to skip that, say where I would like it to go. I'm going to go out on Dev, click Next, and I'll call it masking test, or you could call it whatever you want. And that should just take a few seconds. It's created. Now, obviously, I'm not really proving anything because you know that masking test is tiny, right? But if I go out to my development server and right-click, refresh, there's masking test, and SQL Server sees it as any other database. It's not a big deal. It is like any other database. It does have a couple of extra tables that we've added. If I right-click and select, I should see the masks data. And it is different because I've rerun the masking set. If I would like, I could, let's see, am I connected to, I'm connected to production. Let me just copy that and open a new query window, paste, masking test, and create a new table. So now when I refresh, I have this new table. So it is updatable. You could connect it to source control if you would like. I'm not sure if I've got any source control set up. You can take a backup if you would like. However, the backup is going to be the full size. I'm going to cancel out of that. I'm not sure if I've got the repository set up. I'm thinking that I didn't do that. But you can if you wish, if you get everything set up. But what I'd like to show you now is how it works with a bigger database and scripting. So I have an image, an AdventureWorks image that's almost 4 gigabytes. Doesn't have any clones set up. The other thing is this keeps a audit of everything you do, which is also important for things like GDPR and other regulations. So what I'm going to do is go to PowerShell, and I created a little function called create clones. This is, we have commandlets, lots of different commandlets that you can use. In this case, I want to send a comma delimited list of developers, give it the name of the clone, and where I want these to land. So if I was building a development server. And here's the command I'm going to run. If you wanted, you could save this function in your PowerShell profile and just run the function. In this case, I wanted to show you the function, so that's why I didn't do it that way. Shouldn't take too long. You can see the status is popping up here. And this is a 4 gigabyte database. So even if you had a terabyte database, it would happen just as fast. Obviously, I'm not going across the network. You have to take that into account. But let's say less than a minute per clone. Now, when I go back to my development environment and refresh the databases, I've got a database for each one of my developers that quick. I want to show you too that if I look at the data directory, here's where all the clone files go. They're going to go to whatever the default is. Since I'm just running locally, it's going to my C drive. If I right click on this, it says 220 megabytes. That's for all 4 clones. And the reason is that we're using virtualization technology. We're pointing, we have a mount point to the image, and then we have a small VHD where the local data is. So right now it's just some metadata, but as the developer makes changes, changes data, this will actually change. So it'll take some time, but I think this is just an amazing solution. Really happy that it's all coordinated together to give companies an easy way to complete both tasks, and everything is fully automated. So that's really all I had to show. Well, I do have one more thing. Now that I think about it, I have resources that you can get. I will upload the video as well as the slides. So you can click on any of these links if you'd like more information or want to download any of these surveys. If there are not any questions, we'll go ahead and close up. I'll wait a couple more seconds, but I really appreciate you joining us today. Again, really the takeaway here, start learning about DevOps. Understand that it's a culture change. There are tools out there. Redgate makes tools. We would love it if you use ours, but really the bottom line is make sure you're using tools, especially start with source control. Think about how you're delivering copies of production to developers. So those are the two really areas to start with for DBAs. Okay, I don't see any questions. So thank you so much for joining, and please join us next month in July where we learn more about PowerShell and how to deploy SQL Server using PowerShell. Thanks so much.